7th grade math, test 12, study guide, problem number 1. The question says, Tony and Tiffany collect semi-precious stones at the Rock Count Hut. Tiffany paid $22 for 9 pounds. $22 for 9 pounds means 22 over 9. And I had this worked out already ahead of time for you guys. And if it's going too fast, you can always pause the video, do the work, and then replay and make sure you have what I have. Okay? So, don't feel like it's going too fast, just pause it whenever you need to. So that's what the first part looks like. You put 22 over 9. Second one says Tony paid $23 for 5. So 23 for 5 means 23 over 5. So if I do in and out and I divide, I see 22 divided by 9 is going to be 2 point something. So I'm going to stop right there because I might not need to do any more work. Over here, 23 over 5 means 23 in and 5 out. That's 4 something. This is obviously more than 2 something. So Tiffany has a better buy. Alright, problem number 2. Problem number 2 says, which of the following ratios forms a proportion with 3/4? So we have 3/4 and we want to know which of these given ratios are proportional with 3/4. So I look at the first one, 15 over 24. Well, in the numerator in the top, in order to get from 3 to 15, I multiply by 5. If it's proportional, it has to be the same factor for the bottom. So 4 times 5 is not 24, so that's why this is not proportional. If it was proportional, it would be the same value, same fraction, just written a different way, and you'd know that because you'd multiply by the same two numbers. Over here, on the top, I'd multiply by 5 to get 15, but I wouldn't multiply by 5 to get 16. So 15/16 is not proportional, or not equivalent to 3/4. Over here, C, 3 times 4 is 12. So if I multiply 4 times 4, I don't get 20, so that's not proportional. Over here, D, 3 times 7 is 21, and 4 times 7 is 28, so D is proportional. So we see how we multiply this by the same number, top and bottom. That's what it means, proportional. That's why D is proportional and the others are not. Problem 3 says a van travels 168 miles on 14 gallons. At that rate, how much gas will it need to travel 252 miles? So, if it's 168 miles on 14 gallons, that means 168 miles over 14 gallons. And then the question is, if it's 252 miles, how many gallons is that? So if I put miles on top here, I got to put miles on top here. If I put gallons on the bottom here, I put gallons on the bottom here. I write my proportion, and just like all proportions we've been doing all year, we cross multiply. 168 times x is just 168x, and then I got 14 times 252 on the other side. Now when I do 14 times 252, pause the video and do that off to the side now. Make sure that you got 3,528. If you didn't, do it again and get the right answer. Then I divide both sides by 168. Divide 3,528 by 168. Remember to go in and out, pause that, do that now. And when you did that, you should have gotten 21, which means 21 gallons because X stood for gallons. Number 4 says, a ratio of cars to trucks in a parking lot is 3 to 2. So that's 3 cars for every 2 trucks. And then it says how many trucks, so we're missing trucks, we're going to find trucks, are there if there's a total. That word total tells you you're going to add something. There's a total of 60 cars and trucks. Okay, so we need trucks to total ratio. We have cars to trucks ratio. So we're going to take this ratio and make it trucks, which is 2, to total, which is 2 plus 3 or 5. So if it's 3 cars to 12 trucks, that's 2 trucks for every 5 total cars and trucks because 3 plus 2 is 5. So we got the right ratio based on what they asked us to find. They said trucks to total. So we're missing trucks because they said how many trucks. They gave us a total of 60 cars and trucks. I write my proportion. As always, cross multiply. 2 times 60 goes on one side. 5 times x goes on the other side. Then I multiply 2 times 60 to get 120. And divide both sides by 5 to isolate this variable to get it so it just says x, because then we would know what x is, and x is the missing answer, right? We put a letter where something is missing, a variable, and then I go 120 divided by 5. Make sure you go in and out, make sure you get 24, and the answer should have been 24. What? X stands for trucks, 24 trucks. There's 24 trucks if there's 60 cars and trucks total if we have a ratio of 3 cars to 2 trucks. Number 5 says, Juan earns $12 per hour. Which of these ordered pairs would not appear on the graph? Okay, so this is a proportional relationships, because if he doesn't work, he makes no money. So hours is X, time is always X unless they tell you otherwise in the problem. Time is always X, money is always Y. Okay, because money depends on time. So this first one, if it's 1 hour for $12, $12 per hour, I put Y over X and I get $12 per hour. B, I put, again, Y over X. Money over time, if it's $36 for 3 hours, that's $12 per hour. That's the same. That would be on the graph, because I get the same ratio, right? I get the same slope, same rate of change. So 5, 60. That's 5 hours for $60. $60 divided by 5 hours tells me that that is $12 per hour. That would be on the graph. And D, 4, 24 means 4 hours for $24. 24 divided by 4 is $6 an hour. So that one would not be on the graph. We don't get the same unit rate. So let's look over here now at number 6. And number 6 says, which value would complete the table to make the relationship between the two quantities proportional? So they give us a table, right? They give us a bunch of points. We're just going to pick one other one and then pick the one that's missing a value and just write a proportion, because they should all be the same if it's a proportional or direct variation relationship. So I'm going to put Y over X, 22.8 over 1, and Y, which I'm missing, so I'll use the letter Y, over X, which is 3. I cross multiply, 22.8 times 3 equals, don't forget your equal sign, 1 times Y is Y, and 22.8 times 3 is 68 4/10. Remember, pretend like you're multiplying 228 times 3, then count all the decimal spaces and go from right to left and add them in. That's how you multiply decimals if you forgot. Number 7 says, a line goes through the origin. That means it's proportional, or also known as direct variation. Then they give us a point 1, -8. And they say which of these equations could be the equation for this relationship. So if it's proportional, I can simply find the equation by putting Y equals the slope X. And if it's proportional, there's a shortcut, right? I don't have to do Y minus Y over X minus X. I can just put any Y over any X, and it'll work, right? So what I do then is I look at all of my answer options, and I see that A can't be it, because A is not even a line. You see that little squared? If it's X squared or Y squared or anything like that, that's not going to be a line. Proportional has to be a line. So we can rule out that. B is a line. See, it's regular G and regular T, right? It doesn't have to be Y and X. It can be any variables. But did they put Y over X? Nope, they put X over Y. So it can't be B or D. C, L equals -8 over M. Well, -8 over 1 is -8. That's our answer, C. Another reason D wouldn't work is if I tried to isolate one of these letters, either the P or the X, the other one would have to go on the bottom of a fraction, because I'd have to divide both sides, right? Because the inverse operation of times is division. And we learned in class that if a variable is on the bottom of a fraction, that's equivalent to a negative exponent, right? So remember, it has to be regular X, regular Y to be a line. It can't be a negative exponent or squared or anything fancy like that. All right, problem number 8. Number 8 says, if each person uses 80 to 110 gallons and 7% is used for brushing teeth, washing faces, washing hands, find the range for those activities for 3 people. Okay, so what we have to do first of all is we're going to have to find 7% of 80 gallons, because that's our low end of the range, right? So 7% of 80, we learned the percent proportion in class. We know that it's is over of, right? 7% of 80 means 80 goes on the bottom, because it's 7% of 80. It goes is over of. So percent always goes over 100. That's the definition of percent. It's out of 100. So I always cross multiply. I go 80 times 7 goes here, or it can go over there. It doesn't matter if you got these switched. 100 times x is 100x. And then 80 times 7 is 560. Divide both sides by 100, and dividing by 100 is easy. All you do is you move the decimal 2 times, right, to make it smaller. So 56 divided by 100 is 5.6, but there are 3 people, so that's times 3. So it's 5.6 gallons out of 80 gallons, because 7% of 80 is 5.6. But times 3 for 3 people is 16.8 gallons for those activities. Now we've got to do the same exact thing for 110, for the high end of our range. So I'm going to find 7% of 110, just like we did before. We're going to cross multiply and divide, and we're going to get this time 7.7. And then just like we did before, we're going to multiply 7.7 times 3. Pause the video and go off to the side and do that. 7.7 times 3. And you should have got 23.1, so our range is 16.8 to 23.1 gallons of water used for 3 people on those activities. Whoops. Alright, let me back up here. Okay, so what are we on now? Number 9? Okay, problem number 9 says this. Problem 9 says that a company lowered the price of an item for $140 down to $105, so this is decrease, not increase. And they want to know what was the percent of increase. In other words, you have to find how much it decreased by, and then the question is, 35 is what percent of 140, or the original. So first we subtract. Even for percent of increase, it's the same. First you subtract, and then you're saying that difference is what percent of the first number. Okay, and it's the same for both increase and decrease. Okay, so I write my proportion. The question is 35 is what percent of 140, the original. Since I don't have percent this time, I put my variable above 100, because the percent always goes over 100. And then I cross multiply. I get 35 times 100. Well, multiplying by 100 is easy. You move the decimal 2 times, because there's 2 zeros, right? And I go 140 times x is 140x. Now go off to the side, divide 3,500 by 140, pause the video. You should have gotten, when you did that, 25. And the answer is a 25% decrease, not increase, because it went down. Okay? Alright, number 10 says, you bought an item and paid 4.5% tax. The tax added $3.60. What was the original price, not including tax? So in other words, what this question is asking you, they're saying $3.60 is 4.5% of what number? So we use percent proportion. It goes is over of, right? We go part over whole. New over old. It all means the same thing. But is over of helps us with 99% of them. So $3.60 is 4.5% of what number? 3.6 has to go on top. Cross multiply. 3.6 times 100, move the decimal 2 times to get 360. Divide both sides by the coefficient, by the number in front of x, not by the other number, not by the constant. Go off to the side and do that. You should have got 80, and it's $80. So $3.60 is 4.5% of $80. Number 11. Number 11 says, the price of a train ticket is $195. We're going to get a 35% discount. Well, if you're getting a 35% discount, that means you're only paying 65%, right? So what you can do then is just find 65% of 195. If they're asking you how much will you pay, and that's what it says, what is the sale price? That's how much will you pay? Then you find 65%. A different question would be 35% discount, how much did you save? If it's how much did you save, then you'd find 35% of 195. But this is how much did you pay, or what was the sale price, okay? So again, cross multiply. Pause the video off to the side. You should get 195 times 65. So you should have gotten 12,675. Dividing by 100 is easy, right? Just move 1 2 times and you get $126.75. And ask yourself, does it make sense? You know, is it a little more than half of that? 65 is a little more than half, right? Yeah, it looks about right. Number 12. Number 12 says, during a football game, the Rams gained 8 yards. Well, that's positive 8. Gained 4 more yards. That's positive 4. Gained 2 more yards. That's positive 2. Lost 10 yards. That's negative 10. So I just use teams, right? I have a total of, add these up, 14 positives and 10 negatives. Opposite teams mean subtract. Who has more positives? So the integer that represents their net yardage is 4. 4 yards. Number 13 says, One day in Montana the temperature was 8 degrees, another day was negative 10. What was the difference? Difference means subtraction. So, I take 8, I subtract negative 10. Be careful. If one of them is negative and you're subtracting the negative, if you're subtracting the negative, you should have 2 minus signs there. Add the opposite, right? Draw 2 sticks. The rule for subtraction, that's a difference of 18 degrees. Now let's assume you did it the other way around. Let's put negative 10 first, and then subtract positive 8. I go add the opposite, same teams add. Who has more negatives? I get negative 18. But they're not saying, like the last problem, what's the integer that represents? They're not saying that. They're saying, how far apart are these on a number line? What's the difference between those two? It means how far apart. That's an absolute value. So you always find absolute value for this. So even if it was negative 18, it's still 18 units apart from each other. Number 14 says, write the fraction 22 over 8. Well, go off, pause the video, go off to the side right now, and make sure that do this by yourself first, and then come back and check with me. Okay, so you should have put your decimal right after the end of the numerator. Okay, 8 does not go into 2, so your first number should not go here. 8 does go into 22, that's where your first number has to go. 8 times 2 is 16. This difference down here of 6, well, that shouldn't be as big as or bigger than 8, so I did it right. And since I put a decimal here, you got to put it up top. Now you can add as many zeros as you need. If you put too many, that's fine. They just go away. Now, I drop 1 0 down after I subtract. I drop 1 0 down. 8 times 7 is 56. Subtract those two, drop another 0 down. And 8 times 5 is 40. And we zeroed out. So the answer is 2 75/100ths. 15 says, write 12 hundredths as a fraction. Well, this is red. 12 tenths, hundredths, so it's 12 hundredths. So I write 12 hundredths as a fraction, which is 12 over 100. It's another way to say 12 hundredths. It's meaning the same thing. Then I use factor trees. Then I use my factor trees. Go off to the side and try this on your own, and then come back and check with me. 12 is 4, or 2 times 2, 4 times 3. Remember, prime factorize, break it down till you can't break it down anymore. 2 is the smallest prime number, right? We don't break it down to ones, right? We stop at 2. 100 is 10 times 10, and 10 is 2 times 5 times 2 times 5. 10 times 10 is 100. Cross out our ones. There's a 2 on top and a 2 on the bottom. There's another 2 on top and bottom. There's nothing else, so I crossed all that out. So 3 is on top, 25 is on the bottom. 3/25 is my answer. 16 says, which number below is not equivalent to 8/5? Not. You got to be careful because sometimes it says which is equivalent and sometimes it says which is not. So be careful what they're asking for. So pay attention to that word not this time. So the other 3 will be the same. So let's convert these two. I'm going to take, let's convert this to these two. 8/5 means in and out, right? When I divide. So 8 goes in and 5 goes out. And when I'm dividing these, I can write this as a mixed number or a decimal. So if I'm doing a mixed number, I go 1 times 5 is 8 and subtract. The remainder goes up on top, and the divisor goes on the bottom. So 1 3/5 is the same as 8/5. Check your sign, though. This is positive, so this should be positive too. Over here, same thing, but instead of putting my remainder up top, I put a decimal, put my decimal up top right away before I forget it, and then I can start adding zeros. And so I get 1 6/10. So I'm looking at my answers. A, 1 6/10, this is positive sign, this is positive sign. Always check your signs. That's the same. We wanted not the same, so don't choose that. B, negative over negative. Well, using Mr. Dude, we know negative negative is positive for multiplication and division only, right? Mr. Dude, MD. C, well, it looks like C, instead of going in and out, that's out and in. That's wrong. So C is not. That's our answer. And D, well, we got D, 1 3/5. So the answer is C. Problem number 17 says, which fraction below is between 1/10 and 1/25? Well, there's a couple ways to do this. I think the easiest way is what I taught you guys in class. 1/10 and 1/25. What I do is I take this bottom number here, right, this denominator, and I multiply 1 times 25 over 10 times 25. I'll multiply these two by this number, and I get 25 250ths. Do the same thing over here. Going to take this bottom number, right, this denominator, and multiply it times 10. 1 times 10 is 10, and then times 25. 10 times 25 is 250. So now I can see all the numbers that are in between these two because we have a common denominator or the same size pieces. Now I can see what's in between them. So anything from 24 250ths to what's bigger than 10, 11, 11 250ths, any of these numbers will work. But the trick is you have to reduce at the end. But of all the answer options that I gave you, one of them didn't even need to be reduced. So 11 250ths is in between these two. It can't be reduced because 11 is prime and 11 doesn't go into 250. So that's our answer. B couldn't work because it's too small, right? I got the same size pieces, but 10 250ths is my smallest number. That's smaller than that. That's too small. C is too big. And D, well, D has a different denominator, so I can convert it by multiplying by 10 over 10 to get the same size, and I see that's way too big. So the answer is A. Number 18 says, a faucet was turned 3/8 and then another 2/7. How far was it turned? In other words, we got to add these two together. When I'm adding fraction, I need the same bottom number, right? And sometimes we can just take this number and multiply it here over here, and this other number here over here, just like we did with this problem. But sometimes that's not the smartest choice. So we want to look at our denominators, and we want to see the first time they're the same by looking at their multiples. 8 times 1, 8 times 2, 8 times 3, 7 times 1, 7 times 2, 7 times 3. Those are multiples, not factors, because I'm multiplying multiples. The first time they're the same is 56, so that's why I want these to be 56 on the bottom. Another way to say 3/8 is, well, I want it to be 56, so I got to multiply 8 times 7 to get 56, but I got to do it to the top also, or else it changes the fraction. If I do it to the top and the bottom, 3/8 is the same fraction as 21/56. For 2/7, I want 56 on the bottom, so I got to multiply the bottom by 8 to get 56, but I got to do it to the top also, because 16/56 is the same fraction as 2/7 as long as I multiply it to the top and the bottom, because that's like multiplying by the number 1, and 1 times the number is the same number. It just looks different. So now that they're the same size pieces, I can add the numerators, add the top numbers, but keep the bottom. Don't add the bottoms because that would change the size they are. And then I try to check to see if it can be simplified. This is already simplified because 37 is prime and 37 does not go into 56, right? When something's prime, check to see if it goes into the bigger one before you assume it's simplified. Always check. Number 19 says, we're multiplying -7/9 times 1/2. Well, when we multiply, we always factor first. We always factor first. We're going to take that into algebra with us, right? We're going to factor first. We're not going to multiply first. So when I factor -7, I want to put the negative up top, and that would be -1 times 7, right? I should have done that. I got -1 times 7, and 9 is 3 times 3. 1 is not prime technically, but it can't be broken down anymore, so I leave it, and 2 is prime. So I look for anything that's on the top that's also on the bottom. In other words, I'm simplifying before I multiply. If there's nothing left, I just multiply everything. -1 times 7 times 1 is -7. On the bottom, 9 times 3 times 2 is 18. When I'm all done, I can take my negative, put it back out to the side. If there's 1 left, if there's 2, it goes away, right, Mr. Dude? So I get -7 over 18, and I know that it's simplified because I did this. This is the definition of simplifying. Pull out all your common factors. That means cross out your 1s. Number 20 says, find 4/5 divided by 1/5. Well, I have to make this into multiplication by multiplying by the reciprocal. So the old keep, change, flip, that works. I keep the first one, I take division, make it into multiplication. If I flip the second one upside down, only the second one. I can cross out my 1s. I should do my factor trees like I did up here, but I know this is 4 and this is 1. There's nothing that goes into both, so my answer is 4. All right, hope that helped.